In the summer of 1212, in the high plains of Andalusia, the clash of two civilizations would unfold. To the north, Christendom had rallied under the banners of Castile, Aragon, and Navarre, answering the call of Pope Innocent III's crusade. King Alfonso VIII of Castile led the army. He was joined by King Sancho VII of Navarre and King Peter II of Aragon. Their combined forces arrayed into three great divisions commanded by the three kings of each faction. Sancho of Navarre commanded the left, Peter II of Aragon commanded the right, while Alfonso VIII of Castile had the honor of commanding the center. The Christian forces were supported by various Christian military orders such as the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller, as well as Portuguese contingents with Portuguese and Leonese knights. Though their kings had not come, they still rode under the cross. French crusaders, drawn by the Pope's indulgences, marched too, though many would desert before the battle, weary of the long campaign. Overall contemporary sources estimated the combined Christian coalition army at a total of 20,000 to 25,000 men. To the south, the Almohad Caliph Muhammad al-Nasir, called Miramamolin by the Christians, had brought together the most formidable army the Iberian Peninsula had seen in centuries. His kingdom, the Almohad Caliphate, a powerful Berber Muslim dynasty that controlled much of Al-Andalus and North Africa, had, by the late 12th century, emerged as the dominant Muslim power in the Iberian Peninsula, replacing the Almoravids. Under Caliph Muhammad al-Nasir, the Almohads launched campaigns to reassert their strength against the advancing Christian kingdoms of Castile, Aragon, and Navarre. The Almohad army was heavily fortified, with a defensive line of chained African slave warriors guarding the caliph's tent, and a well-dug ditch placed in front of their elite troops, which provided a great fortified defensive obstacle from head-on attacks. Estimates of the size of the Muslim force vary, but Christian chroniclers describe the Muslim host as superior in numbers, roughly around 30 to 35,000 men. After days of stalemate, the long-awaited standoff would come to an end. Battle was on the horizon. On the morning of July 16th, Alfonso VIII gave the order to advance. His force pushed forward, gaining traction with every step. Although the Christians were outnumbered by about 10,000 men, the experience, hardiness, and reputation of the military orders of the Templars and Hospitallers was enough to sway confidence in the favor of the Christians. The two orders were stationed at the center alongside King Alfonso. On the flanks were Peter of Aragon's Catalan and Aragonese troops. Opposite was Sancho of Navarre commanding his own strong retinue. All three kings took up the main command roles, opting to remain at the rear in command of their heavy cavalry. At the center were heavy infantry and ranged troops. At the vanguard was a mixture of light and heavy infantry. This was where most of the fighting would occur. With this in mind, these soldiers were equipped with heavier weaponry, such as long spears, axes, and lances optimized for breaking through ranks of light infantry. The Christian forces gaining momentum charged fearlessly toward the Muslim lines. Weapons extended, they crashed through the light Muslim infantry, causing sheer panic and disarray. The initial clash was brutal and bloody. The Muslims had seemingly not anticipated such a reckless and dangerous head-on charge from the Christian forces, They had been caught completely off guard and unprepared for such violence. The Christian heavy infantry mercilessly carved their way through enemy ranks with their heavy steel weapons, the light Muslim troops standing no match against such force. Slowly, the front lines of Muslim troops began to falter, morale began to dissipate, and the thought of instinctual survival began to consume the minds of the Muslim troops. The Christian chroniclers recorded that the Christians had fought with such ferocity, such sheer determination in their mission to defeat their enemy, that it was as if not only their lives were at stake, but the very existence of their homeland and loved ones. That defeat had not become a viable option. The Muslim front lines shattered and broke in quick succession. Their men scurried away towards the safety of the second line of heavier, more experienced Muslim troops. The Christian forces opted to not pursue the fleeing Muslims. Instead, they reserved themselves and prepared to engage the heavier Muslim forces in the same ferocious manner. The heavier Muslim troops were stationed on a more elevated hill terrain that had a natural dug-in trench to slow down the advancing Christian forces. The Christians composed themselves, then charged head-first toward the second Muslim lines. Their formation was scattered and organized. Their plan was simply to try and smash through their enemy and repeat the success of the first engagement. Unfortunately for them, this wasn't to be the case. The sloped terrain, in conjunction with the heavier, more experienced Muslim second line, absorbed the Christian charge effortlessly. The initial fighting was brutal. Both armies matched each other blow for blow, with neither gaining any obvious advantage. After some time, the fatigue of the Christian troops started to become a factor from their intense charges across the battlefield and their prior engagement. This was to be the pivotal turning point. The Muslims took full advantage. Their lines pushed hard, gaining ground against the Christians. Now the Christians were the ones backpedaling and in dire need of a strategic anomaly. Hours of intense fighting had passed, and the Christians had failed to gain back any lost ground. The Muslims were well dug in, their position was advantageous, and they were well supplied for the prolonged fighting. With such intense hand-to-hand fighting in the hot Iberian summer sun, many Christian troops began to waver from exhaustion, their morale quickly dwindling, and all signs were signaling for a mass Christian retreat, particularly at the center commanded by Alfonso, where they had been hit hard. It was at this point that King Alfonso was reported to have charged into the front lines with his own heavy cavalry contingent to inspire his men and stop them from breaking and fleeing. His presence, as well as the presence of his elite heavy cavalry, was enough to prevent his center from breaking. With his intervention, it allowed for some of his men to gain a much-needed break. After a short break, his men rallied and charged back into the heat of battle. The Muslims advanced their cavalry into the equation to quickly gain the upper hand. The Christians countered with their own. The countercharge from the Christian heavy cavalry proved to be a turning point in the battle. Not only were the Christian cavalry and knights heavier in arms and armor than their Muslim foes, but they had the presence of the elite Hospitaller and Templar heavy-mounted knights among their ranks, whose reputation was fierce among the Arab and Muslim lands, mainly due to the many crusades the two had fought in the century prior. This, coupled with the presence of the three Christian commanders, Peter, Alfonso, and Sancho, riding up and down their battle lines inspiring their men, gave the Christian force a boost in energy. After hours of being on the defensive, the roles had reversed, and the Christians were the ones on the offensive. They began to gain ground, and the Muslims were backpedaling. Their lighter Arab cavalry could not contend with their heavier Christian foe. Alfonso continued to ride up and down, urging his men on, reminding them of what was at stake. His heavy knights of the Order of Santiago and Order of Calatrava pushed their way through the Muslim center, cutting down any that would dare take them on in combat. Momentum was now on the side of the Christian forces. The battle shifted in their favor. The Muslim positions slowly began to become overexposed. Their flanks now began to buckle, and their forces were spread thinly. Things only worsened when Sancho of Navarre led a decisive charge. His tall figure and his heavy cavalry contingent, according to reports, broke right through the Muslim position, dealing death to any in their path. Many in the Muslim ranks were cut down in this maneuver. Slowly, the Christian advance pushed closer toward the Caliph's guarded pavilion, where the Almohad Black Guard, chained together so none could retreat, stood in grim defiance. By this stage, it was too late for a counter by the Muslims. Their formation had dissolved. The Christian advance could not be stopped. They broke through from all sides. Even the chained guards defending the Caliph's tent were cut down. The Almohad center collapsed under the pressure, and panic spread across the lines. Muhammad al-Nasir fled the field, his army dissolving and running from the field. The Christians were not in a merciful mood that afternoon. They opted to take no prisoners and cut down any and all who were not swift enough to escape the battlefield. Later reports, however, suggest that the Christians may have taken but a few as prisoners, those who were deemed valuable. By evening, the plain of Las Navas de Tolosa was strewn with bodies. The Christian coalition had won a crushing victory. Though they did not immediately conquer all of Al-Andalus, the defeat shattered Almohad power in Iberia. Within decades, Muslim rule would fragment, never again posing the same threat to the Christian kingdoms. Modern estimates put the Muslim losses of the battle at around 20,000 dead, whilst the Christians had lost roughly 2,000. For contemporaries, the battle was remembered as a divine triumph, a turning point in the Reconquista. For the Almohads, it marked the beginning of decline.